Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and do a couple of mic tests. So if you guys want, you can type in the chat. Awesome. Let me know if you can hear me. If you can't, say something. So again, mic testing. If you can't hear me, say something, and we'll try to get the bugs fixed out on that. But I'd also like to thank you guys for showing up today. I know you're enjoying your break, which is great. But again, we're going to do a few things today, and if you can't make it, it's okay. I'll post a video to Google Classroom. We'll wait around just till 2 o'clock and then we'll get started. We'll be finishing up the chapter 14 notes. So if you noticed on the Google Classroom, I've already posted the discussion board. Again, there's 3 little questions. All you have to do is answer one and then ask a question at the end regarding that content and then respond to 2 of your peers. And you get some easy points for that. That way it just kind of keeps you going. So that way you're going over the knowledge. Very similar to what we do in class, asking you questions, just trying to think about a few things over the lesson. Alright, I'm going to be putting up my PowerPoint presentation, so I won't be able to see questions when I do that. But at the end, I'll ask for questions. If you have any, just type in the chat, and I'll be glad to answer anything you got. If I don't get to your questions or something like that, or you have one later, just email me, and I'll be glad to answer it. And I can also post that question into the Google Classroom anonymously, if you would like, and we can answer it that way too. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here. So last time we left off talking about fossil formation and what it takes to become a fossil. But like I said, most fossils remains, we're very lucky to have them because most organisms never become fossils. You have to have the right conditions in order to obtain that. Ultimately though, when we look at a fossil, it's actually not the bones of the organism, it's actually a replica or cast of it because all the bones have been replaced with minerals from those sedimentary rocks. And again, sometimes when they get covered up with layers of dirt and rocks and stuff like that, we never see them for many years until erosion happens or uplifting of rocks. And then we're fortunate enough to find them, like we have for many dinosaurs. Fossil dating, there are some basic techniques like relative dating, comparing rocks with other layers to determine their age. As we look at this diagram below, you might be able to find a fossil and think that it's very, very recent in the geological time scale. But again, due to weathering, erosion, it may actually be a lot older than you think. Because if you look at the picture on the right, you notice it starts off numbering 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8. There was some erosion that occurred between 4 and 6, and we lost layer 5 altogether for whatever reason. Maybe it was a flood, whatever else, glaciers, who knows. But the law of superposition says that younger layers of rocks are deposited on older layers of rocks. So the farther you go down, the older the rocks are essentially. So very rarely would you have younger rocks beneath older rocks unless it was a massive uplifting in the geological terrain. This is a picture of the highway as you're heading south towards Columbia. You've noticed they've done a lot of blasting of the hills and trying to make roadways, which is really cool. Because you can see all the different layers of rocks and the history throughout Missouri. So the bottom rocks and stuff, you think, oh, they're just rocks. But that was actually the topsoil at one time. It has been converted to rocks over long periods of time, again, due to heat, pressure, and all that stuff. But as you look at the rocks, I encourage you next time to see the bands in the layers, the layers in the rock. You'll notice there's different colors, striations, and things like that. And in this picture, you can see one main huge white band at the top. That white band indicated there was some significant event that happened during that time frame. And that's what geologists look at. They go back in time by looking at the layers to determine what events happened. Maybe it was a flood, maybe it was a volcano, whatever it was, but they can tell that just by looking at the layers. All right, some other methods of fossil dating is radiometric dating, using the decay of radioactive isotopes to measure the age of rocks. So how do they do this? So it's called a half-life, the amount of time it takes for half of the original isotope to decay. If you know the half-life and how much of the radioactivity is left, you can tell how old the fossil or rock is. Now, having said that, we're talking about elements and how elements decay over time. You might have heard of carbon, for example. Carbon is a very common element. You are made of carbon. So many organic organisms, you can carbon date up to a certain extent. Okay. As you look further, you can see radiometric dating. You can use uranium-238, which has a half-life of 4,510 million years. Good for dating really, really old things. So you're thinking, well, why can't we use carbon? So carbon has a half-life of 5,730 years. So as you can see in the picture on the right, as we go from 100% of carbon that originally started with, like say up in here, slowly but surely as time passes on, it'll get less and less and less. So again, it's used for about things that are about 20,000 years old. After that, it gets a bit sketchy. I mean, you can get an estimate, but after that, it's not so good. So mummies are great, or things that are mummified, even like mammoths, as we talked about before, we can actually determine their age. But if you're looking at a dinosaur bone, not so good, because once again, they lived like 65 million years ago. So using uranium-238 is definitely the way to go, because it has a much longer half-life. So again, it's just about how much of the carbon in the carbon dating, for example, is left. So here, if you had 100%, there was 10 grams. Over time, 5,730 years, you'd only have about 5 grams left. And then another 5,730 years, 250 grams, and so forth down the line. So you can add those up and determine how old an object is. The geological history. This picture is pretty cool. It's pretty self-explanatory for the most part. It just kind of gives you some of the eras and the periods that existed throughout Earth based upon geological timescales and fossil evidence. As you look at the very bottom, you have the Precambrian. That's where a lot of time existed. There's a lot of just basic organisms, small cells, some maybe multicellular, but not a whole lot going on there for diversity of life as what we think of today. We're just talking microorganisms. Again, you can see it's from about 4,570 to 542 million years ago. That's a long time ago. Then you have the Paleozoic, and you can see all the different periods within that. You can see some of these organisms. When we think about dinosaurs, we think, yeah, they're really old, but they didn't occur until the Mesozoic, so they're actually a little more recent than you think. And then you have the Cretaceous, Jurassic, and Triassic. So we have a lot of dinosaurs and plants and birds starting to emerge at that time. But then, if you look, you can see in the Tertiary, we have that meteorite striking Earth that most likely ended the reign of the dinosaurs, and that ushered in the era of the Cenozoic. And currently, we're in the Quaternary period, and that's when many of the early man and our recent time frame exists. So in the geological time scale, a timeline that expresses the geological and biological events of Earth's history. That's what it is defined as. So an era, as we were mentioning before, is the largest division of time scale. So really, really big. A period is a much smaller subdivision of era, and the epoch, or epoch, is a smaller subdivision of period. Now, if you look at on the right there's a little fossil there, and this little guy is a very interesting cat. So, scientists were talking about the theory of evolution, how organisms must have evolved from marine creatures from the ocean to the land creatures, that there must be some type of amphibious type of fish and whatnot. And somebody asked us, well, if there is one, then you need to find one. Like, let's go back and find one. Let's go find a fossil. So they were like, okay, let's see if we can do it. So they sat down, they looked at the geological time scale, this group of scientists did, and they pinpointed an ideal search area. And they located their ideal search area in Canada. During that geological time frame, back in the day when they were looking at transitioning from marine to terrestrial land, they said, well, this area most likely had a marshy bog area. So if there's going to be an organism that's going to be amphibious in water and also possibly on land, it's probably going to be in this location. Sure enough, they actually dug around and found a fossil, and that's the fossil you can see there on the right. The picture itself of the organism looks alive. That is just a artistic rendering of what it might look like. What's unique about this thing is, and why it's so controversial, is because this little guy, they said, well, if it's going to be going from marine to land, it has to have some type of limbs in order to keep itself upright. This little guy, if you notice, its limbs are actually supporting itself. These fins, so to say, can actually paddle, but they're very, very bony. So that's actually supporting the body weight of its head so it can actually move around. This was one of the first fossils they found in which it went from more of a cartilage type of flimsy fin to a bony fin. And again, this was kind of a rare find for scientists, this transitional fossil going from marine to terrestrial land. Some other eras, they got the Precambrian, which is about the 90% of Earth's history. So that's the very bottom one on that geological time scale. Life forms present are prokaryotes. We're starting to see some eukaryotes. Eventually, multicellular organisms like invertebrates and algae are starting to show up. So again, very small organisms, a lot of microscopic organisms, starting to get some first multicellular. Nothing too big, nothing like the dinosaurs or anything like that. You got the Paleozoic era, which is the Cambrian explosion, the diversification of many animal groups. The first vertebrates, plants, sharks, bony fish, amphibians, and some reptiles. This was an era in which all of a sudden the diversity just happened to, bam, explode across Earth. There was all sorts of organisms. Maybe there was habitats, niches that opened up, in which there was resources they all competed for, and slowly but surely they created their own populations, giving rise to some unique individuals. Again, the geological time scale, the Mesozoic, we have the dinosaurs. That's the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous periods. The first mammals, dinosaurs, birds, and flowering plants all started to appear. We had lush forests, lots and lots of vegetation going on. That's also very important because many of the dinosaurs were in fact herbivores, not carnivores. There was that mass extinction event that we talked about, the meteorite striking Earth down there by the Yucatan Peninsula. We also had Pangea existing in some forms at that time, where all the continents were joined together. As you look in the lower right, there's a picture of a rat mole thing. That was some of the first mammals, what they looked like. They were not big. They were not huge like an elephant or even large like us. These small little creatures existed during the time of dinosaurs, or right at the end of the reign. When we had that massive catastrophic event where the meteorite struck Earth, it changed the climate to a much colder climate because of all the dust in the atmosphere, clouded out the sun, made it more cold. So again, the dinosaurs needing a lot of plant food and stuff died out because the plants started dying out. But these small little rodents that could eat many different things, the mammals, they thrived. They didn't have as many predators. They had plenty of food sources. And as such, they started to dominate. Climate got better, they diversified off, and then we had the dawn of the mammals. You might have seen the Ice Age, the movie, little scrap there. You know, they had all these unique organisms on that movie, and what people fail to realize is during that last Ice Age, there were several thousands of species that went extinct. In fact, even scrap did. You think, well, he's a squirrel. Squirrels didn't go extinct. That's true. Squirrels didn't, but the saber-toothed squirrel did. As you look at this photo here, you can actually see and make out in this fossil remains that this is a squirrel snout right here, and then right there is that long fang. The saber-toothed squirrel really did exist. No joke. I can't imagine if they still exist today. Hunting and all that stuff would be a little more treacherous with all them squirrels out there that could sink their large fangs into you. So, yeah. But yeah, scrap was real. And whether he caused the meltdown or not, I don't know. But this is kind of what Pangea looked like. As you look at the picture up on the upper left, all the continents were together. And this was kind of a mind-boggling first thought, because when you look at South America and Africa, they kind of fit together. Many people thought, well, that might be the case, but they had no conclusive proof, not until plate tectonics came along. Alfred Wegener talked about that, about how plate tectonics can move the continents around. And what was also crazy was the fossil evidence. The fossil evidence showed that there was similar dinosaur species in North America, in Europe, Africa, South America. It's like, how did these dinosaurs swim across the ocean? They sure didn't take a boat or plane. So how did they actually get there? Again, it's because all the continents were together, and as such, they roamed freely across these areas. Once the continental plates divided and started shifting, the fossils went with them. And again, that explains or supports the theory of Pangea, that it once was all connected. As you can see in this photo, I really like this. It gives you an idea of what Pangea might look like and where the countries were at currently today. As you can see, the United States right over here, the East Coast, you got like a lot of Africa here. You got Canada up here touching Europe, Brazil down here also touching parts of Nigeria. I mean, it's pretty crazy when you think about how these dinosaurs might have just lived here, roamed across to New York, and then they divided out, and now they're several thousand miles apart. Again, like I said, the North American continent is moving closer to the Asian continent, Russia and China, about 1 inch a year or so. So keep that in mind. Here's a picture of some dinosaurs, which is pretty cool. So there's many different types. Not all of them were on land. There was many dinosaurs that also roamed in the ocean, as you can see, some like that, or the mosasaurs that you might have seen in Jurassic World. But there was lots of cool dinosaurs. I saw a really interesting meme on Facebook one time talking about how your knowledge of dinosaurs, and had a little chart of your lifespan. The highest was when you were 2, and also then later on in life, in your 20s and 30s when you had kids that were around the age of 2. So, yeah. But dinosaurs are just fascinating to think about what it would be like to actually see them today. I would have a velociraptor. I would ride it to school every day. I mean, really, you can park anybody's parking spot. Think about it. You can argue with me? Really? My velociraptor will eat you. Just saying. Alright, geological time scale. The Cenozoic, most recent, dominated by mammals. Very small mammals that first appeared. Humans first appeared during the Pleistocene. And currently we live in the Holocene epoch. So that is our most current one. When will it change over again? I don't know. It's going to be not within your lifetime, I'll tell you that. Usually they span several thousands of years. Sometimes even longer. So just depends. There you go. Okay, that's the end of the presentation. I'm going to open it up for questions if you have any. So I'm going to go back to my live stream page here. All right, Chase has a question. Was it a predator? As in, which organism was a predator? Chase? Again, if you guys have any questions, I'll stick around here just a few minutes and see if you have any. If you don't, you guys are free to log off and go whenever you want. Okay, Chase says, a saber-toothed rat or squirrel. Is it a predator? I don't know. It must have had the long fangs for something, so I'm guessing it probably used it to eat other small things like insects. But again, keep in mind the insects might have been actually much larger back in the day, so it might have been more lucrative to have those long fangs to hold prey and stuff like that. So I guess if you were going to ask, is it a predator? Yes, it might be a predator as in eating insects, but not necessarily large organisms, probably. Good question. Any other questions regarding geological time scale, something like that? All right. Again, don't forget about the discussion boards. Very easy. All you got to do is type up a response to that. And again, this is just to stay on top of things, getting ready for that EOC as we venture down towards the deadline. So, again, also email me any questions that you might have. All right, I'm going to go ahead and log off here, guys. I'll post this to make sure it's on Google Classroom for anyone that didn't make it. Again, email me if you have any questions. Thanks again, guys, for tuning in. We'll see you Tuesday.